don't know if I'd recognize you if I saw you. I hope your condition hasn't worsened much since you last wrote. I can hardly imagine what a nightmare you're going through. Remember, you're not alone.
If you told me that 2024 would be the year I'd get all excited and engrossed in the grimy underworld of turn of the 20th century struggles in Warsaw under Russian Tsardom, I'd have laughed at you, or pulled a weird face at least. But before you think I've gone down a particularly weird rabbit hole, it's all due to the Thaumaturge by Fool's Theory. And they proved that all you need to make a weirdo like me appreciate such a time is throw in smatterings of the mystical, some tough moral decisions and interesting story content. Oh, and mud. Lots of mud. Your role in the unfolding story is Wiktor Szulski, and you are the titular Thaumaturge. You're a man who was born with the ability to see and interact with demons throughout the world, known as salutors. Each Thaumaturge, when they come of age, is attached to a salutor, which feeds off an inherent flaw of each individual. Wiktor's flaw is pride, and it gives him the ability to respond to various situations in a prideful way, sometimes for comical or a positive effect, other times not so much. Throughout the story, you will acquire more salutors and flaws which impact the game to varying degrees. As well as being able to recognise salutors, Wiktor is a thaumaturge, can also use his innate perception skills to sniff out auras left imprinted on items. So by touching a book, for example, he can not only get a sense of the person who last touched the book, but also what they were thinking and feeling as they did so. This essentially allows Wiktor to become a souped-up Sherlock Holmes, as he can investigate crime scenes and other areas and piece together mysteries simply by searching out items and investigating them. So you'll find yourself exploring this isometric representation of various Warsaw districts, trying to deduce more and more. The story itself follows Wiktor piecing together a story of how his father died, who was involved and why, all while various factions are at play helping and hindering him along the way. Interspersed with the investigative work is the combat. Wiktor will experience plenty of people who want to rough him up a bit given his snooping around. Combat happens separately and is turn-based. Each turn, Wiktor can use one of his acquired combat skills and also get his salutor to act too. You can simply go for all-out damage, or you can perform a skill to reduce your enemy's focus, get it to 0, and they'll be vulnerable for both you and your salutor to unleash a uniquely powerful attack on them. There are also various positive and negative states you can dish out to enemies and receive. Also, some attacks take a certain amount of time to complete, so you need to factor in outcome order as well as keeping an eye on your health bar. This all adds up to a combat system that just works really well. It starts off fairly simple to do, but does a great job of ramping up the difficulty and complexity throughout the game. You'll have to contend with enemies having certain traits at the start of the fight which could scupper your plans, and the only way to remove them is to have a salutor of a certain type attack that enemy. They might also attack frequently, but more gently, or wait for a bigger hit after a couple of turns which you need to factor in. There are even boss fights when you want to try and capture a new salutor, which mixes up the dynamics even further. It meant I was always concentrating from the first fight to the last to check my strategy. Sure, you naturally lean into certain tactics after time, but sometimes you'll need to disregard those tactics and plan something else if the situation requires it. Feeding into all of this is a large thaumaturgy skill for Wiktor and his salutors. Everything Wiktor does, whether it's read a document, deduce something with his perception, or successfully win a fight, earns him experience. Gain enough and he'll essentially level up and earn a thaumaturge point to spend on the skill tree. This tree is divided into 4 parts: heart, mind, deed and word. Unlocking parts of each tree will either increase your ability in one of those areas, increase your health, or unlock extra combat abilities. You can unlock either brand new attacks or skill upgrades that can be assigned to each attack, so they have a secondary ability. This further adds to the strategy within the combat itself, and what this means in reality is you always feel like Wiktor is getting stronger as a thaumaturge and he's growing as the story progresses. Visually, the game is very pretty in areas too. Relying on an isometric viewpoint when Wiktor is exploring allows for appropriate attention to detail when necessary. Some of the lighting effects, for example, are beautiful, and never has running through muddy puddles of some of the dingier areas of the game looked so lovely when the sunlight hits it just right. Character models are decent as well, although not as polished as some AAA titles, but they don't distract from the story at all. From an audio standpoint, the voice acting is strong, and that's quite remarkable given that it is fully voiced despite all the choices available to you throughout the game. It all feels realistic and engaging. The eerie, rousing score that plays during the combat is a bit of an earworm and more than complements the overall feel of the game. Performance-wise, the Thaumaturge is a slightly mixed bag. Combat is fluid with a cathartic punch to the gut, always having a satisfying oomph. Main character models are reliably in sync with the voice acting too for the most part. You may notice some slowdown loading in when you fast travel, but once the location details have loaded in, it's fine. There are also occasions when background NPCs do funny animations while you're talking to other characters, or if they're around during combat. It doesn't ruin the experience, but it's humorously noticeable more than anything else. The other main gripe I had with the game was the fact that despite having collected almost every collectible in the game and doing every side quest I discovered, I still found that I hadn't maxed out the skill tree by the end of the story. And given that some final dialogue options are locked behind having high enough heart, mind, deed or word ratings, I ended up being boxed into a corner and potentially getting a worse ending than had I unlocked these levels. It felt a bit weird as I'm not sure where else to level up, and a lack of chapter select means you can't do much outside of save scumming, which still feels highly unnecessary. It's difficult to know whether it was unique to my ending, given that there are very clear different routes you can take or not. Don't get me wrong, it was still an impactful, powerful ending, but I felt the control taken away from me somewhat. But that aside, the journey of the Thaumaturge was a positive one. I found myself engrossed in its world, intrigued by Wiktor's backstory and the relationship he has with his gift and the lifelong relationship he's built with his salutor. The journey is full of twists and turns and believable, varied characters with allegiances and agendas. The mix of combat and exploration is done really well, with both aspects feeling like they build well around the central thaumaturgy mechanic. I didn't want to stop playing, I wanted to see it through and see all the side content. It was an engrossing mystery that scratched such a delightful itch. Sure, it has a couple of technical issues, but they don't distract from a game that I got addicted to and would recommend to anyone with a passion for a good story and a smattering of the mystical. And for that reason, I'm going to score the Thaumaturge an 8.5 out of 10. Hi there, please hit like and subscribe, maybe tag the bell icon too, so you're kept up to date with everything we post going forward. And if you want to support us via Patreon, you can do that at patreon.com/GodIsAGeek.